Hi guys. Hey Vivek.
Hi Prasad.
Hi Vishwas. Hey Madhav. Hi Krati. Nice seeing you guys. Hey Sarthak.
Hello, sir.
Hi Shiva.
Hello.
And I see Shahid also. Shahid, are you there? Hi Neha. Hey Varun.
Hey Prasad.
Hi. Long
Yes.
time. How are you doing?
I'm doing very good.
Awesome. Nice to see you in this group.
Yes. Same here. I just wanted to meet you and learn a lot of things from you. And it's always a pleasure to learn things from you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for the nice word, Shahid. So I would say, we're ready to get going. I'd say keep your cameras on. This is going to be a fairly interactive thing. And then, of course, as usual, we will have assignments or homeworks at the end of this class. And with that said, let's get going. Awesome. So, a lot of you, let's actually go to the next slide, and then I'll talk a little bit about what interaction design is and how it plays out. Now, before we get into that, a little bit about college. We are an industry consortium. So our goal is obviously to identify, mentor, and recruit rockstar talent. That's one of the reasons why we do a lot of these events, because it allows us to see your work. It allows us to be familiar with you. And of course, it allows us to mentor folks as well. So it's a two-way street, and the goal is, of course, while we are doing the identifying, mentoring, and recruiting, we also want to support a vibrant design community, improve the quality of discussions that we have about design. Because one of the reasons why I started, and today people are still asking what is the difference between UI and UX. Okay, so for me, I struggle because the conversation between 8 years ago to today is different, right? Is people still don't know what UX is. And so what we are trying to do is, if we have to evolve as a design nation, as a design country, we really do need to up our game and really educate ourselves a lot more in terms of what design is and what are all the relevant ways of doing design and all that. So I think what are the strategies? So that's what it is. We support, we want to support a vibrant design community that really understands what UX is, right? And we want to create opportunities for learning from industry, right? And so for those of you that, we also have a series called Pucks Talks, where we invite some of the best design folks from around the world, maybe not best, but people, who are solving UX problems every day, right? And these UX problems can be, related to design, some specific business problem, can be related to teamwork, can be related to getting change done, anything, right? Organizational. So these are practicing designers that are coming and sharing their perspective about how their work goes, right? So, and that's the other aspect of, bringing the industry knowledge to everybody. So that's what college is at a very high level. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay. Rules and guidelines, fairly simple, very straightforward, right? It's a safe environment. We don't judge. There's no such thing as a stupid question, right? It's, if you're asking a question, I would guarantee you that probably there's 5 other people that are feeling the same thing, but they're afraid to ask. And so what our perspective is, no question is bad, because you genuinely have a question and somebody has to answer it. So feel free to ask your questions. We are here for you, right? And my personal goal is ki, by the time the workshop is done, I want to make sure you're walking away with no doubts. Okay. So question hai, if necessary, we will come in 10-15 minutes early. We will spend 10-15 minutes more, whatever, but we will make sure your questions are answered as long as you ask them. Okay. Then the next one is participate and contribute actively. So obviously in any community, what you give to the community is what you get, right? So please make sure that you're participating and contributing. And for a lot of you, and this is real stories, right? There are individuals that say, okay, I need a job. And there've been other members who are like working professionals that go out and say, no, I already have a design job. I'm looking for somebody, and people help each other in this group, right? So that is why I would say the more you participate, the more you contribute, the more other people know you, and the more you have the opportunity to build relationships. Okay. And these relationships can be career defining in a lot of cases. So please make sure that you're spending the time to participate, talk, contribute, and share. Okay. Be kind and courteous to everyone, right? We are and again, we have a very wide, diverse kind of a community. We have people with 10 plus years of experience in design, and we also have people who have, who just about to graduate or who don't know what they want to do, right? So be kind and courteous. Everybody is different, but at the same time, we want to support everyone. Okay. Respect privacy. So again, it's mutual trust. Be authentic. Respect the privacy of like, okay, yeah, this is work, this is private life, so do not intrude into each other's private lives. Keep it professional. Keep it classy. And then one other thing that I would say is I get one payment from you, which is I get to see your faces. With the pandemic, I literally am quarantined. Like, I haven't seen as many faces. So these events give me joy when I see you guys. Okay. So if you can turn on your camera, it makes me feel happy that, okay, I'm doing something that helps a lot of people. So please turn on your cameras. And also turning on your camera allows you to build connections with other people as well. So that is what gives you the best engagement. And finally, if you believe that this workshop is valuable to you, spread the word, because the more people we have in the community, the more it helps all of us. Okay. So that said, let's go to the next slide. All right. So this is a very interesting kind of a role when you look at interaction design, right? So interaction designer generally works with a project manager, right? So the project manager is probably giving some set of requirements, come to the interaction designer, right? They are getting data from a researcher. So they are kind of saying, okay, so what is your research? How am I supposed to use it? So they're collecting that data. And they're giving inputs to a visual designer, right? And they're working in partnership. So technically, the arrow between the researcher and the visual designer should be two-way arrows, but generally you're collaborating with the researcher, the interaction and the visual. They're all working very closely to each other, having discussions back and forth. And the final output is shared with engineering, because then engineering kind of takes it on. Okay. So as you can see, interaction design is a fairly, it's that part which is bringing the business, research, and the visual components together, right? So everything has to stick to each other before you send it over to engineering. And that's what you have to think about. And so there's a lot of thinking and planning that you have to do as a designer. So let's go on to the next slide. And so, by the way, this whole workshop is going to focus purely on interaction design, right? And then there'll be other workshops that will focus on visual and all of that stuff, but this is purely interaction design. Okay. So the goal that the interaction designer has to achieve in this game, right? The researcher is basically getting the data and is basically saying, this is where the north is. It's like a compass, right? This is saying, this is, if you go in this direction, you will hit where you want to go. But the interaction designer has to basically is a logical person, right? They're looking at the problem and breaking it down very logically. And by the way, if you have any questions or comments, please type it in and I will make sure to address it. All right. So the interaction designer is looking at the problem, breaking it down very logically. The next one is they're communicating the flow of the process to the visual design team. So again, it's not a one-way communication. It's a two-way communication, because even the visual designer is a UX person, even the researcher is a UX person, right? So there is a lot of communication going on, like what is the process look like? How many steps is it? Where are the challenges? What are the issues? So all of these things are being communicated to the visual design team, right? And then finally, there is a discussion about the complexity, right? So there's a difference. So there is a communication about how complex the product is to engineering. And there's two kinds of communication that happen. The visual designer is also communicating complexity. Interaction designer is also communicating complexity, right? So can anybody tell me what is the difference between what the visual designer communicates and what the interaction designer communicates? Anyone? Yeah.
Yeah, so the visual designer might communicate, problems like this sort of a component or this sort of a color is going, is going to give a lot of cognitive load for the user to search for it, while the interaction designer might tweak on things like the placement of the button is going to, or the steps from one point to reach to other point to complete a certain action is too complex. So I guess that is somewhat my understanding over interaction and visual.
Okay. So what I'm hearing, and thank you, Mangesh, for sharing, but what I'm hearing from your feedback is the visual designer is going to focus more on the aesthetics, right? Whereas the interaction designer is focusing more on the placement of buttons and the flow of the process. Is that right?
Yes, that's, yeah.
Okay, cool. Anybody else? And you're partially right, partially wrong. So anyone else have a thought? Go ahead, Madhav.
So when interaction designer does the flow, it will be only just a placement or placeholders type. But when it comes to visual designer, I think more or less it's an actual data. So that is where the complexity or challenges exist.
That's actually very interesting. So
yeah,
I would give you 25% of the marks on that, but partly because what the visual designer is doing is like, if you have a cell and you want to put some data in it, right? How would it look like if it was empty? How would it look like if it was correct? Absolutely, it was the right size. How would it look if there's too much data? How would it look in the cell? So you're kind of looking at those kinds of combinations, but there's still something that the interaction designer is doing, right? So go ahead, Akash. If it's possible, Akash, it'd be great if you can turn on your camera so we can see you. Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Actually, I'm doing my dinner, so sorry for that.
No worries. I also eat on camera, so no problem. Nahi hai.
Okay. So yeah. So I think interaction designer focuses on the flows, basically how to optimize it, right? What happens when a user does a certain action, and it kind of they try to visualize and optimize the whole flow. But
Okay.
in case of visual designer, it does focus on aesthetics, but it has to focus how maybe the hierarchy, the content, how it is placed, like is user able to identify, distinguish between the elements that are present on the UI screen. So yeah, that's it.
Nice. So you're actually pretty close. If you just take one more step, you'll get 100% of the marks on that. But think about it, what you missed in there. But it's really, really close. It's a really nice suggestion. Go ahead, Kiran.
I think information architecture.
Okay. So here's the deal, right? So I'm going to answer this here. So like, who just spoke here?
Kiran.
So, Kiran. Okay, no. Before Kiran, who was speaking before Kiran?
It was a random noise.
Akash. Okay. So I think I can take Akash's argument a step further, but let's hear from Shahid. By the way, for those of you that are not aware, Shahid and I have actually worked together. So when we started UXReactor in the beginning, Shahid was actually one of our first hires. So go ahead, Shahid.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make it a little simple. I think what I understand so long, and I've been working with you. So interaction design is more connected with how the system and the user interacts, while visual design focuses on how system looks.
That's right. So it's a really good thing. But again, the specific question was, how does that? What will you communicate to engineering? Right? There are two different things that you communicate. So I think Akash and you are kind of in the right ballpark. The difference that comes is this. If you're an interaction designer, you're looking at the problem very logically. You're saying, how does it flow? It's like, when you're designing a house, which room will connect to which room, where should every room be placed, right? So that is what you're looking at. And how does it fit within the plot layout, right? Because you're looking at the the limitations of your real estate as well, and you're trying to fit everything. So it's a very logical exercise. And generally, what they communicate to engineering is, okay, you need to plan for 15 screens. So the normal, the way we learn in school, and we teach pragmatic UX, okay, which is a practical way of doing design. So what you learn in school is ki, there will be some interaction will be done, some visual will be done. And then finally you will give it to the engineering guys and they will develop it. Magically, the product will succeed. It never happens that way. Okay. What you do is first research, you bring in the research, you distill the data that you have, and then you plan ki kitne screens bante hain, kitne unique screens bante hain, how many variations will be there, right? And accordingly, that is the first thing that you communicate to engineering. So listen, I expect that there are going to be about 10 screens. You will have 5 unique screens, and you will have 5 duplicate variations of those 5 screens. So the engineering knows, okay, what is the complexity there, okay? Then you also know what data has to go into what screen, because you're logically looking at what is the problem that this flow is solving. So you also know what data has to come in. So you're talking to the engineers and saying, this is the data we need. So start developing your APIs so that by the time visual is done, your data is flowing into the UI. Okay. So the data and all that stuff happens. So ideally, as soon as interaction design is done, the backend engineers start working on the data and all of that stuff, right? So that they can prepare the system. And then when it goes to the visual engineer, the visual designers are basically going to look at, they're still going to use the UX skills, but they're going to look at it from an aesthetic perspective. Again, they will do a logical double check on that. And then they will make sure, by the way, a visual designer is fully allowed to take whatever the interaction design has done and change it completely, as long as it meets the goals. Right? And this is where the interaction, visual, and research guys have to agree upon the goals of the design. Okay. And then the visual designer will design the screens, and then the visual designers communicate in the front end to the engineer. Okay. So that way, what happens is engineering has already started working as soon as the visual designer, the interaction designer has completed their job. Okay. And that is how it works in a pragmatic environment. Okay. And now that you understand, is everybody clear on the roles of the interaction and the visual and how it works out in the process?
Prasad, one query here.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead, Nirupam.
what UX designer will do here, Prasad?
All of these guys are UX designers, Nirupama. So, and that is the thing, right? So in the Indian market, unfortunately, people say that there is something called a UX designer, right?
Yes.
A visual designer is also a trained UX designer, because they have to understand psychology. They have to understand how, how you're designing form fields, how you're designing widgets, how you're designing for scalability. Visual designer has to do that. Interaction designer is basically looking at the logic of the flow, right? That is also UX.
Yes.
Right? And the researcher is kind of balancing both of these opinions, because the visual designer is looking from an aesthetic perspective. Interaction designer is looking from a logical perspective. And the researcher is sitting in the middle and saying, okay, no, this is the goal. So, the interaction design is right or the visual design is right. And then you're working together to come up with the final product. All three are UX designers. Now, what you see in the market, people say, I want a UX designer, right?
Yes.
Now, UX designer ka matlab ye hota hai ki it's a combination of skills. So ideally, there's a T-shaped designer that says, this designer does everything. But reality it's not possible. I've seen very few T-shaped designers, right? So, for example, with me, my career, I'm colorblind, by the way. I cannot do visual design for nuts.
Okay.
Right? But I am extremely strong in research, right? And that was my primary strength. And everybody starts their career that way. You start off from one primary strength, and then you start valuing, and gradually kya hota hai? You pick up another strength. So for me, prototyping and interaction design were natural add-ons to me. So I picked those up and I became pretty good at them. And then over time, what I do is, where I started ending up is, I ended up managing people. I never have to do visual design. I manage visual designers.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So if you get good at two things, you're already ready to be a manager, right? So at that point, you don't need to do the nitty-gritty of everything. You collaborate with people.
Yeah, true.
Does that answer your question, Nirupama?
Yes, Prasad. So as a UX designer, he has to do everything. So in that one only, there are segregations, interaction and researcher and visual designer.
Exactly. And generally, when you go to mature organizations, you will see those segregations. Right?
Yes,
So, I mean, it's like you go to a small hospital, they say, I'm a doctor, I solve every problem. Right?
Yes,
you go to a big hospital, they say there's a cardiologist, there's an oncologist, there's this, there's different flavors of it.
Yes.
So the point is, the more mature an organization, the more segregated the roles are.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And that is where the career grows. And remember, I talked about different kinds of companies where you get hired, right? So the type 3 companies, the mature companies that will help your careers grow, are the ones that have segregations.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
The
True.
type 2 companies are the companies that are basically trying to get the most out of you. So they'll say, visual bhi kar sakte, ye bhi kar sakte, come join, do some work. Right?
Yeah.
But in reality, you're not specializing. You're just like a, an MBBS guy who's sitting there and treating all kinds of things, right? But you're not really growing in your career.
Yes, yes. True, true. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Kiran.
Hi, sir. Actually, I had a doubt that
Hey, can
I've
you
been
turn on your camera if possible?
sure, sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Huh. So I was just saying that I've been working as a product designer from last couple of years. Being a product designer, my major work is in and around the UI majorly. And when there is when there is a work of UX, also I interfere in that with the product manager as well. But from last few months, I've been wanted to target to get into UX specialized designer now. So my question is that quite similar. As a being a UX designer, do I need to have a thorough understanding about the interaction design as well?
See, you need to see, again, you have to figure out what your area of specialization is first, right? And again, it depends on what stage of your career you're in. Okay, if you're a junior level person, absolutely you need to know enough about everything so you understand how the system works, right? But you will still have one thing that you're really strong at. Okay, now that is how you kind of get into the industry. Now, let's say you're a mid-level person, you're an individual contributor. I would say, yeah, you still need to have one really strong thing, and you need to have like one thing that you're reasonably good at. Okay, but by the time you get to the next level, you need to know enough to be able to manage. So you need to know the language, you need to know the thought process, you need to know all of that stuff to be able to communicate and engage with other disciplines. Right. Now, what is interesting is you said you have a title of a product designer, and this is something that I tell everyone in my classes, right? In the market, and this is how careers die. When you get into a company, your boss might give you graphic design or whatever, and you get these graphic design jobs. And then, at some point you'll say, no, I want to do UX. I'm resigning. I want to get a UX job. They'll say, no, you can do UX right here. Okay. So you will say, I'll change your title. So he'll give you a title of UX designer. Okay. And now you're technically still doing graphic design, but you got a title of UX designer. So when you interview with other places, they'll say, no, this guy does not know UX, right? So now product design is a new role. It's a new title that's come into the market, right? And traditionally in the US market, which is, relatively more mature for design, product design is, UX design is you're looking at user needs and, and you're trying to create a product, right? Product design actually takes it one step further, right? You're looking at user needs and you're also looking at business needs.
Business needs, yes, sir.
Right? So that's actually a promotion on top of UX design, right? That is
yeah,
how
I
it is.
heard of this actually before.
Yeah, but what is
in
funny, the way
India,
you
it's
describe
quite different actually.
Yes, and that is where you have to be really careful with your titles. Don't focus on the titles when you're getting into a job. Focus on the job role and the responsibility, because that is what. And then UX guys, real UX guys, we are trained because we know there's a lot of title mismanagement. So when we talk to people, we understand unka titling kya hota hai. Okay, but that's a sidebar. That's a sidebar. So does that answer your question, Kiran, by the way?
Sure, sir. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. So, Punish, is it okay if I take your question later because I want to keep going on the deck?
Yeah, sure, definitely, no issues. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. But I will get to your question. If I don't get to it in the end, please remind us and then we'll get to your question. Okay?
Sure, yeah.
Cool. So let's go back. Awesome. So this is what the goal is, right? So your goal as an interaction designer, and again, some of you might be, right? So if you are logically, and that's this psychologically, if you're very logical and very structured in the way you think, right? And you enjoy, connecting the dots, I think that is where the interaction design role is for you. Okay. So let's go on to the next slide. So I'm going to give you some live examples. We're going to do a case study. and then we'll go from there. Okay. But before we get to that, the common challenges that you will face as an interaction designer is once you do the product, it doesn't work, right? You've designed it, you give it to engineering, the engineering does exactly, if you're lucky, they will do exactly what you wanted them to do. But then when you launch it, it doesn't work. Okay. The second one is the scope of work doesn't get support from the team, because you might say, this is my scope, and the team will say, no, I don't think you should focus on this. You should focus on something else. Okay. That's another problem. The third issue is like, people will say, you're making this too difficult. Just give me the pixels. Okay. So they don't actually buy your work, or they would say like, you're making it too complex. Either it's not engineering possible, or it is not time possible, whatever. There'll be X number of reasons, or they might not even agree to your reason of why you're doing it. Okay. And the next one is not having enough time to systematically and creatively think about the problem. Okay. And this is by far the universal problem that I've heard from every designer. Like, like they don't give us time to think. Okay. Now I have a different perspective on that. As a pragmatic UX guy, right? I see people who spend hours and hours, right? Designing basic widgets like buttons, drop downs, whatever, and all that stuff. And I see my challenge with that is, why are you reinventing the wheel? Why do you need to be creative in doing a drop down, right? Be like, if you're designing a login page, why should you be creative in designing a login page? I need to focus on this widget, this widget, this widget, right? No, think about, do you even need a login for your product, right? That is where creativity is. Okay, because designing a widget might make people feel good, but if you get rid of the whole login process, it will actually create an amazing experience, and people, will engage with your product a lot more. So it creates much more business goals, right? So that is the difference that I would say is thinking systematically means there's a lot of knowledge that's already out there that you need to know like the back of your hand. Okay, do not reinvent the wheel. Focus on the real creative aspects of design. So that is what my take on that is. But I'll tell you exactly what I mean. Let's go to the next one. Okay. So here's the challenge, right? This is what we are going to talk about today. How do you think about a problem logically and comprehensively? Okay. So let's go to the next slide. Okay. So when you think about a problem logically and comprehensively, and a lot of you, you've seen multiple formats. You will see flowcharts. People will teach you flowcharts. People will teach you, what do you call hierarchies, like the tree structure, information hierarchies, and all that stuff. Like, and that is absolutely wrong. The moment I see information hierarchy or like the tree structure where you're saying this page will be here, this page, I know that person does not know UX, right? Really, if you're doing interaction design, the first screen that you see right on top, that is exactly what I want to see. Okay. The flowcharts are a distraction. Whatever you're learning with flowcharts are wrong, right? And and I'll tell you why. If you can, if you want to get that clarity, ask me. And by the way, nothing I say is, word of God, right? So question me, challenge me. And if I cannot convince you, then you are right. All right. But that's what I would say. So, when you're looking at it, you basically do a workflow, right? So that's what is called a workflow. And when you're doing the workflow, you're actually planning for multiple things, right? So you're planning for errors, you're planning for intersections, like how do different experiences intersect with each other? For example, if you're looking at a shopping page, okay, the shopping cart, you can come to a shopping cart from multiple places. So one way you can come there is you can go to the home page, and then you probably already had things in your shopping cart. You click on the shopping cart and you buy it. The other way is you go to a product, you add it to your cart, you see the cart, you go back, and then you add some more things and then you buy it. A third way is you might get an email from the company saying, hey, you still have things in your cart. So you might click on that email and go directly to your shopping cart. So the point is, you can, when you do today's products, they're so complex that every page will have multiple places where you're coming from. And from that page, you can go to multiple places as well, right? And so you need to be able to plan those intersections of all of these experiences. Then the other one is you need to plan alternative use cases. You need to plan how to optimize. You need to plan how to look for legal issues, right? Because every country has different legal issues. And in fact, what is interesting is design is probably one of the few industries, the disciplines that is regulated by law in some countries, right? Including Europe as well as in the US. There are laws to kind of tell you what kind of design you should and should not do, right? And then you're also looking at user limitations. So these are all the things that you should be thinking about as you're doing a workflow. So today we will only look at errors, okay? I'll give you the example from errors, but what I would expect is that you kind of do your research and look at the other things as well. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so here is the page, right? So this is an experience where you want to help users log in successfully. Okay, so if you want to help users log in successfully, ideally what you will say is there's a home page, right? This is what most of us will do. There's a home page where you have a login, then you click on the login button, then either a pop-up happens or it takes you to a different page where you will see the user ID and password, right? And you type it in, and then you go to the logged in experience, right? So this is what you're looking at. Now, can you tell me how many errors are possible? And by the way, every interaction designer is expected to do this, right? And that's what I mean by logical thinking. So how many errors can happen here? Anyone, just type it in and tell me what kind of errors you would see, or you can, just type in your suggestions. Not many, you have to give a specific number, Rishank. So 3, so which is forgot username and password. Ashutosh is 3, incorrect ID, sign up, okay. Punish is 3, okay. So that is the only kind of errors. Are there any other? ID and password, both, forgot password. Okay, so you can forget your ID, you can forget your password, or you can forget both, right? So there's another one where the system may forget to inform you that there's a problem, right? OTP is not coming, but in this case, there is no OTP. There's simply a user ID and password. There is no OTP, right? Cool, awesome. So on average, I'm seeing maybe 3 or 4 errors that I see here, okay? Now let me go through this systematically, okay? Awesome, guys. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, how many kinds of errors can happen, right? You can have an error while typing, and you can have an error while remembering, okay? And I'm going to break this down a little bit more. Let's go to the next one. So this is what you would do. You literally would document the errors. And again, I'm not saying I'm comprehensive. I'm simply giving you a taste of how an interaction designer thinks, okay? So you're basically looking at how many errors, and you document all the errors. So let's go to the next one. Can we go to the next slide, please? Right. So now you've identified that there are 2 kinds of errors where you're saying, okay, there's a type of error while planning, while remembering. So now, how many use cases should I plan for? Right? So how many error use cases should I plan for in this case? Are we still sticking to 3, or does anybody want to increase the number? 5. Okay, so somebody said 5, which is incorrect ID, forgot password, wrong password. Okay. 4. 2 for each use case. Okay, because there's user ID and password. So you have 2 for you forgot there, two types of errors, and 2 types of errors for you typed it wrong and you remembered it wrong. So that's where it is. Okay, cool. So let's go to the next one. Let's look at this systematically. Okay. Do they have an account, and do they remember they have an account? And by the way, these kinds of charts are really important. These are called basically decision grids. Okay. These decision grids should be in your sleep, right? So aapko aadhe raat mein utha ke bol diya, what are the decision grids for logging in? Okay. You should know these decision grids. Okay. And this is what I say, a lot of people don't know this. And when they get in the job, they start discovering it on their own. And that's what I mean by reinventing the wheel. So the decision grid is this. So do you have an account? Yes or no? Do they remember that they have an account? Yes or no? Okay. So if they do they have an account? Yes. Do they remember? Yes. There is no problem. There is no use case there, right? Do they have an account, but do they remember? No. So there's error number one, use case number one, right? Do they have an account? No. But if they think they have an account, that's use case number two. So there are two use cases just in this error. Now let's go to the next one, right? So username and password. Do they forget their password or remember their password, right? So if you remember your username, you remember your password, no problem, right? If you remember your username, but you don't remember your password, that is use case 3, right? You don't remember your username, but you remember your password, that's use case 4, right? If you remember, do not remember your username and password, that's use case number 5. Okay, now let's go on to the next one. Right? And I'm only talking username, password with just 2 form fields, itne sare errors aapko mil rahe hain, right? So now you're saying, do you remember it and are you typing it correctly? Because there's a transcription error that can happen, right? So let us say you remember your username. Okay, are you typing it correctly? If it's yes, there is no problem. But if it is no, that's use case number 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, everybody agree with this? Just type in yes if you agree. If you have any disagreements, type in no. That's fine. And then I'll be happy to take your questions here. Okay, and this is what I mean logically solving the problem, because it's just like deriving a mathematical proof, right? And once you derive this proof, your knowledge is guaranteed. So that's what it is. Okay, now let's go on to the next one. Okay, so now you're listing down all 9 of these issues and you're writing the issue, and now you're planning for this. You're not even, you have not put your pen to the paper yet. You're literally still working at an Excel sheet level. You're planning ki kya errors ho sakte hain, what is my solution for it. So if you look at issue number 1, you're basically saying, okay, let them register and then prompt them when they enter the email that they have an account and let them retrieve the details, right? Issue number 2, they don't have an account, but they think they have. Let them register. So if you're putting their user ID and password, you can just register them, whatever the user ID and password is, and you send them an email, isn't it? So you basically convert that logging in process into a sign-up process, right? They remember the username but forgot the password. Let them reset the password. So systematically, you've identified this, right? But now, when you start looking at it, you start realizing that some of these solutions are similar, right? And some of these multiple of them will solve the same problem. So let's go on to the next slide, right? This is where you start optimizing your solutions. Okay, so you're saying, okay, let them reset the password. Issue number 8, 9, and 3 are the same issues, right? So basically, you've created 5 unique solutions out of these 9 issues. Now, when you look at it, there's also one more special use case that you see here, right? When you look at issue number 1 and issue number 9, right, or issue number 5, right, they actually seem very similar, isn't it? So what it is it's the same experience with a minor variation, right? So do you see that? Does everybody see this? I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to understand this. If you have any questions, it's important. Just ask the question. I want to make sure you're all on the same page. Is there any website, Dhwani asks, is there any website which helps users retrieve username if they forgot the password? Yeah. So there's lots of websites that do that. So in fact, even if you go to Google, well, not Google, because your email is your password. So if you forgot your email, good luck, because you're not using it. But if you go to like a website like TurboTax or places like those, a website that you do not visit often, you might visit it once every 6 months or once every year, then people even forget their user IDs, right? And so that is where you can retrieve it. I believe tax is one. IRCTC also does, if I'm not mistaken, based on your email address, they connect your user ID. But again, there's lots of websites that do that. It's mandatory for them. If you forgot your user ID, will help you retrieve it, right? So yeah.
Using password or number or Gmail ID like?
No, you use other identifiers. So for example, if I forgot my TurboTax password, they'll ask you for your email address, and then you put in your email address and you'll get it. In fact, even my stockbroking company, in fact, I can say just stop sharing this and see if you can go to vanguard.com. This is a website that is one of the largest mutual fund owner in the world. So can you just go to vanguard.com and share the screen? Rajiv, if you can share the screen, that would be great. Right, that's the URL. Right. So you have other data points, especially when you're looking at financial websites and all that. You have email addresses, you have their telephone numbers, you might even have their addresses, right? So you have that information. Go to personal investor. Okay, scroll down, click on login. Click on login on the top. Okay, see, it says forgot your username and password. Click on enter, click on forgot username and password underneath it. Right. So there you go. So, it says social security in the US is equivalent of an Aadhaar card. Because you're doing financial transactions, they have other pieces of data to verify you by. Right. And so it's asking first name, last name, social security number, date of birth, and zip code. And it's basically correlating all that with what you have, and they will probably send you something in your mail to your address, right? So that way you are not, and they'll just say this is your user ID. And then once you get your user ID, then you have to retrieve your password. So these are fairly common when you look at financial websites. It's guaranteed because you don't want to handle people on customer service. All right. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Cool, awesome. Go ahead, Neha, you have a question?
So I've seen a website wherein if in case accidentally person is entering a wrong domain name in their email address. So is it a use case for a interaction designer to plan for, or is it a system thing that they need to take care of?
See, this is a very interesting question, right? So let us say that you have to enter your email.
Yeah.
Okay. And I say kprasad at domain dot house, let us say, right? Now, technically, and this is where interaction designers also worry about computational loads. Okay. Now that request is going to be sent to the backend, right? Now, let us say by bad luck, the backend accepts it. You have no way of reaching that person over email, right? So you have used multiple CPU cycles, and this is what is CapEx, right? For companies, when you're wasting CPU cycles to send out emails and stuff like that, it costs you money because you have huge server farms, and it costs you electricity, it costs you all of that. And one mistake can be done by 1 million people. Now you're spending 1 million times 1 watt, right? So you're spending a million watts to solve this problem. So this is where an interaction designer can come in and say, no, right? You don't want to do that. These are the domain roles, and you basically validate it right in the front end and make sure that they've put in a valid email address, right? Just by doing that, an interaction designer can save a company millions of dollars. Right. And that's also part of the deal, like interaction designers and visual designers are expected to think about the cost of hosting and the technology stack, the cost of the technology stack while they're working with customers. Right? But again, that is something that you will get as you get more senior, you will get to it, right? But right now at this stage in your life, I would say, yes, you have to worry about it, but don't worry about it too much until you have your basic fundamental skills in place.
The concern was that is it a designer's job to or is it a user's job to take care of the domain name and not on the name they mentioned in the email address?
Is it the
expecting users to remember the domain name? Is it the right expectation from user?
Okay, that's a very interesting question, right? So should you expect users to, and it depends on the domain that you're working in. If you're talking financial, right, where giving access to the wrong person might potentially, bankrupt some other individual and the legal issues that come with that, you absolutely do not want to take that responsibility. You want the user to know it, right? But let us say it is something like, maybe a Swiggy. I mean, even Swiggy has your credit card information, but a Swiggy, right? Where the focus is getting the person into the system as quickly as possible. You don't want them to remember stuff. So it depends on the domain in which you're deploying your solution. Does that answer your question, Neha?
Very much, I guess.
You don't look convinced, that's why.
No, so so this website ClickBuzz, right? If you enter your email address, it's a simple website. It's not a financial. It's just a ClickBuzz. You are just going there to watch the match or check the cricket score, right? And if I accidentally in the module 1 of this course in heuristic evaluation, I was checking different websites and been through that website, and I purposefully and removed I from Gmail. And yet he said that you'll find your login credentials and mail on your email address. And I was checking mail. It did not give me any message. So the point was expecting users to remember the email address and also the domain, and it's a lot of, I guess, expectation. I could be wrong, but that's what I felt.
Yeah, that is true. That is possibly true. And again, ClickBuzz is like, it's a cricket website, and there is minimal cost to kind of getting it, right? So in those kinds of a scenario, I would actually say that there needs to be some client-side verification of like, did you put in the right stuff? Did you do basic spell checks, right? Okay, you put in, it kind of looks like Gmail, but are you sure this is what you meant to type in, right? So there is some kind of validation would definitely be helpful there to kind of get that thing going on. And your use case is probably the worst, because you have typed in something assuming that is correct, but you mistyped it and you don't know a mistake, and then you're expecting an email which is going to take up to 5 minutes, and you don't know how to get it. So you probably, that website has potentially lost you as a customer because you cannot log in.
That was the point, yeah.
Yeah, so that's really good. So yeah, so in that case, for that website, it's a huge usability issue.
That's true.
Cool, awesome. Anybody else? Why do we use CAPTCHA while login even when we know our registration details? Now, interestingly enough, this is Prashant says that, right? And again, we can get into the details of why you do a certain design or not. But when you do CAPTCHA, it's a very simple thing. Today, the amount of internet I think it was 2018 or 2016 or sometime in that time frame, something really historic happened on the web, right? Which a lot of us are not aware. The amount of traffic being generated by bots became more than the traffic being generated by human beings, right? And so consequently, there has been a significant amount of work that is being done to kind of mediate this kind of bot traffic, right? And this bot traffic is only going to increase. This is basically a concept called software agents that was pioneered at MIT Media Labs. And so basically the idea is you are going to have a series of agents that will work for you, that will connect with all the websites and get your information and manage it. Right? And that's only going to increase as AI increases and all that. You're going to have these agents that will mediate how they work with the different websites. And you might not even know which website is providing you what information. Right? And so when you think about those kinds of scenarios, it becomes much more important for a website to say, okay, are you a bot, especially if it's part of their business model, to disambiguate between a bot versus a human being. Okay, and that's why you basically do these CAPTCHAs and all that. But we can get to that. But let's go back to the presentation. Right. So here we've identified now 5 unique use cases or solution sets out of everything that's been done. Right. And we've also realized that solution number 1 and solution number 5 are kind of similar. Right. But they're different. There's some subtle differences, but they're still kind of similar. Okay. Now what you do is for each of the solutions, now you do a workflow. So let's go to the next slide. So this is solution number 1, which is for issue number 1, right? Where you're saying that, okay, in this case, you just basically, you want to retrieve the login details from the registration flow, right? They have an account, but they don't remember it. So you get them to register. And as they're registering the information, you realize that, hey, you already have an account. And then they receive an email with the username and verification link. And then they save the credentials and they're basically on their way, right? So very simple process, but you've kind of identified it. Then the next one is for solution number 5, right? So you look at solution number 5. Let's go to the next slide, please. Right? And you'll say, let me look at that. So in this case, they're trying to retrieve login details from the login flow. Okay. So you're basically going from login and you're saying forgot username and password. So you're only changing the next 2 pages. Pages 2 and 3 you're changing, but everything else is same. Okay. So in page 2, you're saying I forgot my username and password, and then you're sending the reset link, and then everything is back to normal. Okay. So in this case, out of 6 screens, you just modified 2 screens. Now let's go on to the next solution. Right? And this is what you're doing systematically, solution by solution, you're working it out. Okay. The next one is you're solving for registration. So you're saying, okay, yeah, so here's the login. Here's where you put the, users don't have an account and they think they have. So you get them to the login page, they enter their username and then say, hey, by the way, you don't have this username doesn't have an account. So do you want to register? So then you convert into a registration experience and you move them along, right? Then you come to the next one, right? So this is the next solution where you're saying they remember the username but forgot the password. They remember the password but are entering it incorrectly, and they forgot the password and entered it incorrectly, right? So these are the different use cases. All of these are merged into one kind of a solution set. Yeah? Then you come to the next one, right? This is the next one where they remember the password but forget the username, remember the username but are entering it incorrectly. They forgot the username and entering it incorrectly, right? So these are the username related issues. This is the flow that you've done for that. Now you go to the next one, right? And once you've done all of that, then you're consolidating the flow. You create a consolidated flow that basically tells you what the experience is going to look like, right? This is what is engineering ready. Okay. So from an error perspective, now you will do the same thing. Now we did this for errors. You'll do that for interactions. You'll do for all the other areas. It's like literally like putting filters, right? When you look at a problem, you put different filters and you solve it with those filters, and then you solve the comprehensive solution, right? Once you do this, nobody can touch you. And by the way, every designer should have a personal repository of solutions, right? So you will have like 10 solutions for login, right? And then when a company asks you, like, when you are doing this project, the first 2 or 3 years that I say is where the most amount of ragada is, right? You have to put in the most amount of work because you're figuring out all these solutions. But once you have a history of solutions, after that, it is just automatic. You just say, okay, what is your problem? What is this? Therefore, this solution will go, and you literally give them this experience pattern. Okay. And that's how they basically execute. Cool. Everybody clear with this process of how we plan for errors and interactions and all of that stuff?
So I have a question. Can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead.
So
but you need to turn on your camera, Akash.
So I'm trying.
I have a question. Like, do we have to put wireframes over there?
Hey, I don't see you. I don't see you.
Hello?
Yeah, I can't see you. You need to turn on your camera.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I was asking that, do we have to put wireframes over there on the flow, or can we just, draw some boxes and write some use cases or whatever?
That's a really good question, right? You do not do wireframes. If you do wireframes, you get worried about the page. Whose page mein, what are the widgets and all that. You never do wireframes at this stage. At this stage, you're only planning the flow. Okay. So don't worry about the details. You're only talking about one, in this, like if you look at the screen that we have, it just says this button and this button. We are not talking about the details of that page. Okay. So that is the right way to do it. Never do wireframe. Once you finish all this, you do your interactions and all that, then you'll realize that this page is supporting interaction from so many other flows. These are the possible errors. These are all the use cases that this page will be used for. Then you go into wireframes. Okay. Cool. Go ahead, Praneeth.
Yes, sir. So actually, you were suggesting to build a repository of errors. Sorry, not errors. Basically, the solutions for each errors for each and every designer. So,
no, not solutions for each error. Like you're creating scenarios, right? Login scenario.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, for a login scenario, there are 4 or 5 different. In a login scenario where, like, WhatsApp, you only have to enter your telephone number. Then you will have a one unique solution set for that. In a login scenario where you have to put your user and password, you will have another solution set for that. In another one where you have no login, you might have another solution set for that, right? So what you will do is you'll have 5 or 6 solution sets for login. The same way you'll have 5 or 6 solution sets for dashboards, 5 or 6 solution sets for searches, right? And this is what I say, UX is not rocket science. It is just a matter of, it's like playing chess, right? A chess grandmaster has played so many games that they know if I move this, the other person does this, they know all the likely scenarios, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so they have played it. So that's what you need to do. You need to have your own personal repository of experiences. And when somebody says, I need you to do this experience, you literally copy and paste and execute with that, right? Okay. Unless and until the market changes or the technology changes, in which case you have to update your your workflow a little bit and then deploy it again.
Yes, sir. Actually, I was coming to that because nowadays we are seeing in terms of cyber security or whatever. So it is always updating. So there are some new stuffs coming out where you can actually capture the words from the image or something because somebody was saying about the captcha. So nowadays there are technology where you can actually take out the words or the text written on a captcha and then you can work upon it. So now I feel like even captcha is not safe. Like at least that can be bypassed. So in those scenarios, like how do we update ourselves? Like how do we update our solutions?
See, that is where you have to ideate. You have to sit down and ideate through those use cases, right? And this is also a funny thing, right? A lot of people, and I'm just taking a sidebar because I know a lot of you will be interested in it. And feel free to tell me, Prasad, you're going off on a wrong direction, and I'll come back on target. But I see a lot of people that do their portfolios. Okay, when they do their portfolios, there's a challenge. Should I use my company's work or should I do something brand new? Okay. When you do your company's work, you're taking the company's secrets. And, the kind of company we are like, and most companies that deal with secrets, we work in the defense sector and all that with, security products that work with NASA and the US Navy and all that. So for us, we have very tight legal constraints, right? So if anybody comes to us when they present their work, right, and we see that they're talking about their work that they've done in their company, right, we automatically reject them because we know that this person does not care about intellectual property, right? So the way you should be approaching is, instead of saying that I designed this problem for this company, you can say how I solved the login problem, how I solved this dashboard problem. You're creating an abstract solution set and you're putting that in your portfolio, isn't it? So it's not a specific secret for the company, but it is still showcasing your skills. And that's what I would say is, like, for people who want to showcase their interaction design skills, showcase the abstract components, right? Rather than the specific solution you deployed for one company. Okay, cool. So does that answer your question, Praneeth, the previous comment?
Yes, sir, definitely. And the last point you told, actually, it was also a doubt I wanted to clear somehow. So yeah, thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. So go ahead, Abhijit.
Hello. I wanted to ask you, I had an experience where when I was designing the considering different user cases and designing the grid and everything. So like I had a superior who told me, don't go for problems which are like very rare, like 1 in 1,000 kind of situation. Like even something that Neha suggested, like don't go for so rare cases, design for the core, like what majority of users will approach or have an issue. So I just wanted to know your take on that actually.
And I would agree with that argument, right? I would agree with that argument. But the question is, and why is that argument being made in the first place? That's what you need to understand, right? So let us say that you did not solve a problem, okay? And now the next time you have like, let's say 2% of your population calling customer service, right? It is practically zero for you to solve it online, right? But if you have to call customer service, you're paying somebody a salary for the next 15, 20 minutes to solve your problem, isn't it? So even if that person is getting paid, let's say about $30,000 a year, right? You're still, and this person has spent 15 minutes talking to you. Like, I'll give you the sense of scale at Google, right? Or Google or Microsoft, any of these big companies. On average, a company like Google will make maybe about 45 cents per customer for the whole year in profit, right? Because they have so many customers, it becomes profitable in the big picture. It's a scale. Now, let us say 1% of those people call customer service, right? It's a small percent, even 0.5% call customer service, right? Where you're talking like it's a, let's say about 1 billion users, and it's 110 million people, half a percent is 5 million people are calling customer service, right? And customer service, you're paying somebody, let us say about $20 an hour, right? And these guys spend on average about 15 minutes, right? So that means you're spending about $5 per person, right? 5 million times 5. You have already put out $25 million in expenditure for your call center, right? So that is where scalability comes in. So again, you have to look at how big is your company, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, right? And then you then decide, okay, for this company, they can handle a 0.5% call rate. There's no problem. They're willing to spend the money. Okay, I won't capture any issues that are less than 1% or 0.5%, right? So you have to define that threshold. But even when you define it, you need to have a way to recover, right? So you still need to create a flow that says, what if an error happens that is unknown, right? How do I handle it with this person? You still need to plan a flow for that, right? So maybe the top 10 issues that you handled, you created a unique flow, and then anything below that is too small. So you create a generic flow that will help you resolve it. Yeah, that's the way you have to approach it.
Okay, thank you.
Cool, awesome. So Kiran, you have a question? We can't see you.
Sir. Just a second.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Actually, my question was actually like, there's a lot of misconception regarding the role names actually in India. I've been seeing that. Example, like when I saw about this webinar related to interaction design, my first thought was raised in my mind. It's more related to UI, which I'm not inclined. I thought of ignoring, but like I thought like let me attend and understand it. But when I came over here, the understanding or the explanation you gave in terms of interaction design is quite different actually. I mean it was eye opening for me actually. So what your take on this actually, sir? Like there's a lot of misconception regarding the roles and titles, like when you are applying for the companies or even the post in LinkedIn as well actually.
Right. And this is a very interesting issue that people who've been with me for a while will know. I talk about it fairly on a regular basis, right? There are 3 kinds of companies out there in the market, right? And again, I say that in a way when I tell people, how do you plan your careers, right? So where you start your career is where you will end up 10, 15, 20 years down the line. So you need to plan for your career from day one, right? And planning for your career also includes identifying the correct company, right? Which company should I work for? And generally, I would say there are 3 types of company: type 1, type 2, type 3, right? And I've worked in India long enough, like, when I set up the company, I was in India for at least the first 5 years. So I know the Indian ecosystem fairly well. What I realized is the first kind of company is companies that want graphic design. They really don't care about anything. They are graphic design and that's where they are, right? So that is type 1 companies. So they don't care about UX. They have no idea about UX, and those companies, you have to avoid them like plague, right? Then you have type 2 companies. Type 2 companies are companies that know about design, right? And generally, the way most Indian companies know about design is through their venture capitalist, right? Because a VC is the same guy that's funding a company in the US, Israel, Japan, doesn't matter, right? They're funding all around the world. So these guys have a very global perspective. So if I'm bringing US dollars to invest in India, I'm going to tell my portfolio companies that you have to invest in UX, right? So that is the first time most of these startup guys hear about UX, right? Oh, UX is something, right? So now they've heard about UX, their VC is saying, I won't give you more money until you have UX people on your team. So now these guys are in a panic and say, I need to go find UX people, but they don't know what UX is. So that's a type 2 company. So what they will do is they'll go out and hire people. If they're lucky, they get the right person, they've hit pay dirt. If they're unlucky, which happens 90% of the time, they'll probably get somebody in the market and they'll say UX doesn't work for me because this guy doesn't know UX and I don't know UX. So don't know, it's a blind leading the blind. That's a type 2 company, right? But eventually, they will always be struggling. They'll talk to people, and after 3 or 4 years, they will realize, okay, this is what UX is, right? So that is a type 2 company, which, it's good for junior level folks when you starting to build your career and all that, and you have the right mentorship. It will pay your bills and you're learning and you're practicing because your boss also doesn't know, you also don't know. So, but you're motivated to learn. So together you can figure it out, right? But then there are type 3 companies. These are the mature companies, right? So these guys know exactly what they want. They know the skills, they know the titles, they know everything, right? And so once you know these guys, you go in there and then you say, okay, yeah. So us company mein, you go there, you're going in a mature ecosystem. That is where your career is going to take off like a rocket, right? And that's the thing that I would say. So for a lot of companies that say, hey, I'm looking for, interaction designer, UI, right? If they have no clue, they're a type 2 company because at least they know the word UX, right? But they have no idea what UX does, right? So that is what you need to be thinking about. Does that answer your question, Kiran?
Yes, sir. I just want to describe one small incident, like why I came up with this question is that this is one, like we have a designer called interaction designer in my team. His job is to just take care of the motion graphics, like when there is an interaction happening between the two components or like widgets actually, how well it could be translated actually to given that for the engineer references actually. That's what he does basically, and that role has been termed as an interaction designer, so it was quite confusing for me to understand actually.
So again, don't worry about what the market tells you. This is what my advice, and you will be surprised. We have some influencers, I won't take names, but we have some influencers who say without having an Apple computer, you cannot become a designer. And it just blows my mind. Right. So, and that's also, one of the reasons why I created this forum and this stuff is because I'm just so frustrated by the kind of discussion. And, we were created because we want to hire people. We are desperate for talent, right? And as long as people hear the wrong things, they get wrong titles, they get all kinds of wrong stuff and they come in, it happens. So it's like, personally, I would say, don't worry about the titles. In fact, I was hiring a person from an IIT or a triple IT, sorry, one of the triple ITs across the country, I think about 4 years ago. And this girl was telling me, salary is fine, everything is fine, but my title is wrong. So change my title and I will join you, right? And my thought was, well, I can't help you, right? Just because you feel a title is wrong does not mean that it is wrong. You know what I mean? And so there is, when you go to more mature companies, they will be unwilling to work on their titles. This is the title, this is what you work as, because this is where I see you working. Whereas when you go into companies that are type 2 and all that, they will say, even type 1, right? Take whatever title you want, because all I want is your work. Right? So there's a difference in that. So I'm glad you bring that up. It's a fairly common, but unfortunately a very painful experience in the Indian design scene. So go ahead, Madhav.
Hi, sir. So my query is on the consolidated solution. So shall I, as an interaction designer, at this point of time, shall I need to interact with engineering team on solution, or will the expectation will be on work deliverables as a wide flow?
Because once you have done this flow, this
right.
is the first time. What you will do is once you do this flow, in
right.
fact, we have a lot of free resources for everybody to use, right? So Rajiv or Saurabh, if you can share your screen and show the interaction design, the workflows and all that on College, that would be great, because we've created a lot of free resources. And once you do that, and we've created standards for that as well, right?
Okay.
All you have to do is just literally follow those standards, right? And you would be able to, and this kind of also goes to Apurva. It's like, how do I learn UX without going to design school? And honestly, Apurva, I'll tell you where design schools help, right? Design schools are really good because it helps you get an interview, right? Because people say, okay, you're somehow certified at some place, I'm going to interview you. But beyond that, design schools, at least as far as I've seen, including the top institutions, right, do not actually prepare you for what is going to be at work. We have on our forum folks from IITs as well, right? In this group itself, we have people, right? And you can, when you make friends and all that, you can talk to them. So, but again, design schools are not necessary, but what you need is that discipline and that structure, right? And there's lots of free content. You just have to identify the right kind of people and go with it. So if you scroll down, literally all of these courses are free of cost, right? And these are like, but this is only content, right? So we go in can you go to the form design, interaction design mein chale jao? And literally, we have curated this and say, if you only learn these topics, you are good as a designer, right? So workflows mein chale jao, go into workflows.
Right. This is your solution, right?
Yeah. And so when you actually communicate with your engineers for each of whatever the consolidated workflow you have created, you will create page numbers, right? You will identify how many unique pages you have, how many variations you have. Okay. And then you are just communicating that to the backend engineer saying, this is how many pages I expect to happen. These are the kind of backend front-end calls I expect will happen. So, just by looking at it, an email call you have to create. You have to create a recover user ID. If I give you X, you have to give me Y, right? You've mapped all of that. And so your backend engineering is starting to work right after that.
Okay. So I can communicate the solutions with them before the wireframes, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So no. Don't do the wireframes, because you may be surprised in the wireframes as well, right? So if you have an understanding engineering team, you can communicate number of pages right now. Okay. But if you have an engineering team that will complain, this guy keeps changing his specifications, I would say don't talk to them until you complete your wireframes and give a comprehensive specification to them.
Okay, sure. Because sometimes what happens, even at now we have optimized the solution from 9 to 5, but sometimes again, if we rethink, chances are that the solutions may again restrict to 1 or 2 or 3 maybe, because today we have identified 5, but maybe in other cases it may be 1 or 2. So at the end of time, again, I need to go to because the expected delivery will be definitely wireframes, right? So that was very bizarre.
Well, this is where you being friends with your engineering team helps, because you are now at this point telling them that these are the data calls I want you to make. And you can set expectations with your engineering counterparts that when I give you workflows, it will tell you what data calls to make, but it will not tell you how to design the screen. If your engineering team is on the same page, your product team is on the same page, and once you do this, the people will realize what you're doing is very, very fast and very rapid, and they will get onto your system.
Okay, sure.
Okay. So actually, can you go down to the final context and variations? Go to draw the workflow. Go to draw the workflow. So yeah, these are very simple bite-sized pieces of content that tell you. And then on every workflow, you're basically seeing this is how you're basically supposed to do. And then do we have a gold standard somewhere?
Yeah, we should.
Checklist, maybe.
Scroll down. Yeah. So notice there is a number on top next to every page description. Do you see that number?
Right. Yes.
Right. That number is what is, so when you start numbering all your pages, you know exactly, like, that's what I said. Any designer, if you're sitting in a meeting room with the CEO and the CEO tells you, like, or the business leader sitting next to you, and says, your screens are too complex. Says, no, it's got only 5 unique screens and 20 variations. So how is it complex? You need to know that. And when you talk to your engineers also, you need to know the scope of effort, because the engineering can plan their timelines and efforts and all that stuff. Okay. So again, these best practices are all put up here, right? So if you don't have the money, or you don't have the inclination to get a design degree, all of this content is available.
Sure.
Right? And this is all free. We've curated it, so there is no surprise. If you just do this, you'll get a job as UX designer. There's no doubts about it. Right? Okay, let's go back. Let's go back to the presentation. Thanks, Saurabh. Cool. Go ahead, Punish.
Yes, sir. So basically, am I audible?
Yeah.
So I was saying that like the previously you mentioned, okay, the types of companies 1, 2, and 3. So like by specifying the exact role of our, like what exactly we do. So are we not like limiting our opportunities and something like it, because like it's a very competitive market as well. Like I said, many UX/UI designers. Because like from last 2 years, I've been doing UX/UI designing for like as a freelancer. So like I've worked with multiple startups and I enjoy both. Like I enjoy UX part as well as UI part. So just wanted to clarify, okay, what I am doing currently is good or like I'm doing wrong or something.
Let me tell you a story. I'll tell you my experience that happened just yesterday. Okay. And I'm talking from a company's perspective. Okay. And I'll tell you from the individual's perspective as well. So there was there's one of our members that I'm, and I like his work, I respect his work. And so what I did was I recommended this person. There's like CEO communities, right? So I'm part of a CEO community for all of Hyderabad. So I literally sent a short message, like 20 words. I said, I have this design intern who this guy is looking for an internship. He's very sharp, humble, blah, blah, blah. And I said, please direct message me if you want it, right? In the next 10 minutes, I had 15 plus people approaching me, right? They said, please share, right? In fact, it wasn't just that. They said, we will issue an offer letter immediately. Don't even share it with anybody. We will give the offer letter immediately. With sight unseen, no interview needed, right? And then, eventually, and this guy got interviewed by a bunch of guys. He had, I think, 2 or 3 offers in hand already, right? And it got so bad that one company wants him and they went on the same group and said, oh, this guy's already accepted our offer. He has not accepted any offer. They said, this guy's already accepted offer, no need to talk to him. Right? So from a company perspective, this is how desperate companies are to hire good talent. Right? I mean, that is non-negotiable, right? But I'll take you to another perspective, right? Do I reduce my chances? Yes, you do to a certain extent, but no also, okay? Because what I say is you reduce your chances, but what are you reducing your chances for? You're reducing your chances for mediocre jobs, type 2 jobs, right? And you're increasing your chances for type 3 jobs.
Exactly.
Isn't it? So would you rather get 10 offers from companies that will take your career nowhere, or 1 offer from a company that's going to take you to the moon?
Yeah, makes sense.
Right? And that's what I say. So for me, at least, one of the things that we call it the rockstar UX designer, right? Rockstar UX designer, there's enough rockstar jobs out there with people willing to pay money, right? And premium, right? I'll tell you, like somebody I just heard, there's a company, a multinational company that paid a 80 lakh salary for somebody with 7 years of experience. Right? And in my book, this person does not even rate like on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is like awesome and like, they deserve it. This person rates at a 4. Right? So the jobs are out there, opportunities out there. It's just like you just need to be really good at it, right? I mean, you need to target what kind of a job you want. That's what I mean by career planning.
Yeah, exactly. Because like last 2 years I've been working like as a UX designer, but I don't finding any like a certain amount of growth in my career. Okay, like if I've given 2 years, so from there I must be like at least reach by there. But yeah, that was lacking.
Yeah, no, that is interesting because even within, we also do run training programs, right? And what we find is, interestingly, most of the people that join our training program, people with 2 to 3 years of experience. It's not people who are freshers, because they now understand that my career is dead, I need to move forward. Right? But anyways, let's keep going. Thank you, Punish.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so this is where you're consolidating, and this is the first point where you can document how many pages you have. And by the way, I've not put the numbering on this, but you will put numbering. And so just by looking at it, you will realize that homepage is a unique page, right? Login is a unique page, right? Or it's a pop-up, it could be a pop-up. And then homepage is the same as the previous one. And so like literally in this thing, you have like maybe 2 unique pages, and rest of all of these guys are variations. And so it's very simple, very straightforward. So now you optimize for engineering time as well. And this is where the premium comes for the type 3 companies. Why would a type 3 company pay you that much money? Well, because you're saving millions of dollars by creating optimized experiences for them. Right? So Wasim, yeah, so that's also another use case. If you want to log in with social media accounts, that's a different use case. You need to plan for that. So that's also an interesting opportunity. Now, there's an interesting problem that comes with even social media, because everybody has Facebook, LinkedIn, and all this stuff, right? So Microsoft. So what if I signed up with Google last time, and this time I forgot I signed up with Google, now I'm signing up with Facebook. How do I connect both those accounts, or do I create two unique accounts? Right? There are different interesting problems that come with social media accounts as well. So you need to plan for all of that in a very systematic manner. And that's what this experience is. All right. So any more questions about this specific flow and this way of thinking? Ayush says this is only a theory workshop or practical too. I wish we could do practicals. This is where your homework comes into play. Right? So I will give you homework, and you're expected to submit the homework, and then you get feedback from everybody that's here, right? And then we do have other programs, but again, the time is less, and we need to make sure that we are covering quite a bit of material, because I want you to at least know what interaction design is and what you need to shoot for before you kind of start on that journey. So hopefully that answers your question, Ayush. Right? So let's go on to the next one. Okay, so this is what we did for errors. So you have to do the same thing for intersections, alternatives, optimization, innovation, statutory, user limited. All of this stuff you need to do. User limitations is what if somebody is blind? What if somebody is deaf? Or what if somebody is, let's say what if your user is a fighter pilot who's pulling three Gs, and the blood is draining out of their brain, and they have to use your interface, right? These are all use cases that you're actually playing with. Right? So you're thinking about those user limitations as well, and these are all the things you do. So go ahead, Nusrat. You have a question or a comment?
Yes. So my question is, in order to access the username and password, we are using the email ID. What if we
so your audio is very low. Can you speak up a little bit, please?
Yeah. My question is, in order to access username and password, we are using the email ID. What if we are not taking the email ID during the registration process or the sign-up process?
Exactly. So that's what you have to plan as an interaction designer, right? So you have to plan for the use case that somebody will forget their ID in the future. And so you have to take that data somewhere else, right? Or that's a registration flow. So you have to plan for that in the registration flow. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. I'm glad. That's a really nice question. It's a meta level question, but it's a really good question. Go ahead, Praneeth.
Yeah, so actually it's an extension to Nusrat's question. So I've seen a couple of apps, you can say like Go IBBO. So basically if I'm taking out their website, so they will be asking me for my email. Then at some point of time, they will ask for my mobile number for registration. But if I'm going to basically just try out their app at the first place, so they'll be more interested towards my mobile number. So they are basically trying to take my mobile number, and they might take my email at the later stage. So why is there a difference in, like in the desktop, they are preferring for email first, and in the mobile, they are preferring for a mobile number, like, to register through a mobile number. So I have been confused about that stuff. What will be their ideology? So any take on that?
I have a take, but I'd love for this discussion to go on to Discord, and let's see if you guys can find the answer amongst yourself. Okay. If you don't find the answer, tell me and I'll answer it for you tomorrow.
Sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Go ahead, Nirupama.
Yeah, Prasad, these use cases while doing, we have to discuss with business and engineering team as well, or so from interaction designer itself, we have to give it.
See, you are negotiating. So at every point in the step, every step of the way, I mean, think about it, right? You are an engineering manager. You have a history as an engineering manager, right?
Yeah.
So you could probably tell where you have the most amount of frustration with your designers, right? Because the argument is designers have unrealistic expectations, or like designers keep changing the specifications. And that's when your team will come and complain to you like that guy doesn't know what they're doing, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
So the point being is, if you want a smooth functioning team, you want to create open lines of communication and open lines of discussion, right? So what it is when you do things systematically, when you do something like this, now you're only talking API calls, right? So you're solving one problem at a time in a systematic manner, right? When you do your wireframes, now you're talking how the page will theoretically be laid out, right? Now, when the visual designer comes in, they might change the layout completely, but that's okay. But at least you know the relative complexity and you are negotiating at each step of the way.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so that is what the idea is, to be practically working in a work environment. It's all about open lines of communication and negotiations. Right. And this is where, for example, when you show this and you do these API calls, the engineer is becoming your partner, because say, I can't do this call, but I can do this call. Would it work? And now it's forcing the designer to think in other ways, isn't it? Whereas if I show the complete experience and I say, now you react to it, people don't know what to react to. So the leaders will react to the UI, how it looks, right? Engineers will react to the workflow, and then somebody else will react to the complexity. Somebody else will react to the amount of time it will take. And finally, the designer is fighting with 15 people and not executing anything.
Yes, yes, true.
You understand that difference?
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So Akash, go ahead.
I want to make a point here. Considering the login flow, right? Each of the, like if we consider banking login page, the experience there has to be different from the Facebook login page, because here at the banking page, if you try to, if you fail more than 2 attempts, you would, your account would be blocked for 24 hours. So how, like this, I think this differentiates through domain, and how do we say that, like, is this a business problem kind of thing, or how do we
no, this is context. This is user context, and I'm glad you talk about it, because this is one thing I tell everyone: no design is bad design. Every design has a context in which it succeeds or fails, right? So, for example, if you do a WhatsApp style of login for bank, it won't work because the risk of failure is too great, right?
Okay.
So you have to understand the context. It is the reality. It's a user context that you have to understand. You have to understand the business risk for it, and then you have to plan accordingly. But it's still a UX role.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay. So today we basically talked about the first two problems, right? Which is the product doesn't work once it's handed over to the engineering team. So if you do something as systematic and comprehensive as this, problem number 1 is solved. The scope of the work doesn't get support. Of course, it will get support, because once you sit down and discuss, and in fact, one of you had talked about, my manager told me, don't think about the lower use cases. Well, you can get agreement here. What is the threshold? Is it 1%? Is it 0.5%? Is it 2%? What is it? Once you agree and you design for that, nobody can turn around and come to you and say, you did not design it, or you didn't design it. We had an error. We lost customers. And you say the scope was already discussed. We discussed the threshold. We all agreed to it. So now how can you turn around and say no? So this is the strategy that would come. So the first two problems basically work with documentation and plans for it. Okay. Tomorrow we will talk about getting buy-in for your work, right? How do you get people to buy in? And day after tomorrow we'll talk about how to plan for functionality and systematically think through all the different use cases. Okay. So let's go on to the next one. Okay. So again, for those of you that are not members, and again, we keep this membership for, say it's like, it's about, I think, $750 or whatever. But the idea is that you at least need to pay something, otherwise you won't value what you're getting, right? And there's a certain amount of seriousness that comes in. You need to commit and you need to share and talk to each other. So that's what it is. There's a membership fees that comes in, but the idea is, come join. We have monthly workshops like this. We have challenge events, and not just that. Now we are also starting this thing where we're going to bring in designers from around the world, where you get to talk, interact, and engage with them and see how they've solved problems in their work experience. And then, and these are all curated by me personally. And so that way, it's a way to improve the quality of discussion and discourse that we have about UX within our community. And not just that, it also helps us understand, build networks within these companies and kind of get opportunities. So that's what the idea is. So if you're interested, sign up for the membership, and then you get invited for day 2, and then we continue on from there. All right. So let's go on to the next slide. So yeah, cool, Astha. So Rajiv, can you share the sign up link in the chat box? That'll be great. Okay. Now here's your day 1 assignment. Okay. Now the goal is to send an email successfully to a recipient. And remember how I did that, right? I did decision grids. I identified the different kinds of errors and I did decision grids. Okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to do exactly the same thing. Document the errors in a worksheet, right? Put your answers and save your name and, share it on Discord so that everybody can chat and discuss, and make sure that just submitting the assignment is half the job. Contribute to other people's growth. That is how other people will contribute to you. Okay. It's a simple nature of law of nature, right? Upload the filled worksheet on the Discord group, and at least give feedback to 2 people. Okay. That's what it is. And one thing that I do want to say, right, is I want to call out one person. Now, if you've liked this work, and I know a lot of you enjoy, these sessions and all that, I want to talk about somebody who's been working behind the scenes for a long time, and that's Saurabh, right? And Saurabh has been my partner in crime. He has been working with me to create a lot of this content day in and day out, right? And I've been giving him sleepless nights. So, all of this content is Saurabh's hard work and his, his diligence in making sure that you guys are, getting the best value. So I want to acknowledge Saurabh and thank him for all the hard work. And one other person I also want to acknowledge here is Rajiv. He's our community leader as well as a designer. And if you, he's probably talked to most of you in this group, right? And, one of the things that he does is he talks to you, he tries to understand what you want and all that stuff. And he's basically giving me feedback, like people want this, or this is where I think you could do better or worse or whatever. So, Rajiv is also here. So I don't know if they've got their cameras on. I see Saurabh, but I don't see Rajiv. So yeah. So thank you, both of you guys, for the really good job done. And, I mean, if this is working, it's because of both of these guys. Okay. So thank you. All right, so let's go on to the next slide. I'm not sure if we have anything else here. Okay, that's it. So thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it. If you guys want to stay for 5-10 minutes, I have some questions that are open. So Praneeth, if you want time from me, I would just say, one-on-one, you just talk to Rajiv and see if he can get you on my calendar, right? And then if you have any questions, I'll spend another 1 or 2 minutes and answer any questions that might be that you can share across the group. So Praneeth, is your question something that's shareable for everyone?
Actually, sir, I wanted to say like the last session that I had done on that resume. So a lot of people even today who are here. So you had given me some kind of feedbacks and it really helped me. So now I have just after that, when I like somebody approached me basically after seeing my resume, and they I have just cleared my technical interview as well. So they have like given me a design task as of now, and it's almost finished as well. So I just thought I would update you regarding the same. It really helped. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Awesome. I'm really happy for you. And the good news should be given in public. Bad news, private में तो कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. But this is good news. This is very nice for everyone.
सर आपसे कुछ advice चाहिए था तो इसलिए सर.
So, I mean, ask your question. I can answer it right here if it's a public kind of a thing. I can answer.
No, sir. Actually, I wanted to ask you, like, how do we tackle imposter syndrome? So, which is basically a stuff in UX industry. So, I'm going through that currently.
See, everybody has an imposter syndrome. I myself have gone through imposter syndrome, right? So, and you know, some of the guests that you will see in the Puck talks, everybody will tell you they've gone through that moment. The simple fact is, you know, you will never know everything that is required for you to be successful at any job. Whenever you join a new job, you have to understand the culture, you have to understand the people, you have to understand the product, you have to understand the technology, and it will take time, right? And not just that, so you also will have to understand how you're interacting with everybody else. So it takes time, okay? So you just have to be patient with yourself. The only thing that you can do is put your best effort day in and day out, right? That's one thing. The second thing I will also say is you have your community, you have us, right? You literally have to come into the community and ask for help, isn't it? I've had members who've got their first jobs and they come back and say, you know what, I'm really stressed. I got bad feedback, right? Well, that's okay, right? Bad feedback is part of the game because, you know, falling down and getting up is the game, isn't it? And also the other thing that I'll say is like, what is the worst that will happen? You get fired from your job?
Yeah.
Big deal. You'll get another job. The market is hot.
Actually, it is affecting my self-confidence. You know, sometimes I feel like I'm not ready for it, and I just don't even take that initiative. But sometimes, like others feel like, yeah, I'm okay for that, and they tell me, yeah, you can go for it. But I'm not able to, you know, decide like, should I go for it or not? And it's always like that. So.
See, I'll tell you a story from my personal perspective, right? So when I graduated out of school, my master's thesis was search assistance. What you see in the suggestion, you know, when you type in, you see the keywords come down. That was my master's thesis, right? And I was probably one of the few guys, probably the only guy in history in that university at Wright State, where we got funded to make that a proper company. And then 2001, the company, you know, .com bubble happened. I had to go get a job and I ended up going to Honeywell Research Labs as a scientist. Okay. Now, these guys are rock stars. These are the guys that have worked with the NASA's and all that. And I was the junior most guy, but I had headweight. I had arrogance, right? Where I went in and I'm like, dude, I know everything I need to know, right? And believe me, I got beaten down like crazy because you're talking to giants, man. People who were there with Apollo 11 and all that stuff, right? These guys are giants in their field. And I'm standing there like arrogant. Of course, I'm going to get beaten down, right? And I completely lost my confidence. And I was, by the way, laid off from that job. In fact, the first 6 months, I got a performance improvement plan, right? This guy is not up to standard. All right. Then, of course, I managed to get it in the next 6 months. I got I ended up getting a team contribution award. But the big picture was that I wasn't as successful as I thought I would be, right? And then that time Yahoo was building a search engine, and then the Google Yahoo negotiations failed. And then and because my master's thesis was search assistance, they brought me in. And then I was told that I'd be leading the search experience for the search engine, right? Now, what was interesting at that point was my manager sat me down on the first day of work, right? And she said, Prasad, whatever you do will be seen by 150 million people by the end of the week, right? And just then the week before, I had heard that one of the guys on front page, Yahoo front page, was fired because he increased the load time of the page by 1/10 of a second, right? And I was freaked out, right? I was literally freaked out that naukri chale gaya, right? And California is not a cheap place to be, right? And I was totally freaked out, and I'd also lost a lot of my confidence from my previous job because I was like, I don't know what to do, right? And then at some point, I sat down and I did some reflection and I realized, see, I'm working in the Bay Area, right? I'm working with some of the best designers from around the world, right? Because at that time, Yahoo was the mother of all internet, right? Today, nobody knows about it, but it was the one that founded the .com bubble, right? So like my colleagues who were there at that time have gone on to become the VPs of design at Netflix, ServiceNow, LinkedIn, Google, all these companies, right? So they're all my colleagues that I used to work with at that time, right? And so that was the caliber of people that I was working with. And I realized that, if I'm working with people that are smarter than me, all I need to do is I need to spend time learning from them, right? What is the worst that will happen? They'll fire me, right? But that's okay, right? My goal is to learn and grow, okay? And once I got into that mindset and I said, this is my opportunity, right? And as long as Yahoo will pay me to keep my job, I will keep my job and I'll keep learning. That was my simple goal. And that automatically changed my mindset, because here you're putting the pressure of delivering, right? You change that, you're saying, I'm going to learn. This is a learning opportunity. That's all I'm going to do, right? And the pressure was gone. I built so many amazing relationships with people, because I would say, I'll do my work in 8 hours. When everybody's gone home, I'll do my work. And that 1 year was slog for me, right? And then I'd go to everybody and say, I'll do your work also. You just teach me what you know, right? So I learned qualitative research studies from this girl who graduated at Carnegie Mellon and ended up leading Walmart Labs, right? I learned quantitative stuff from a guy who's basically leading metrics as one of the top companies, can't name the company, right? I learned how to design, rapid iterative design from a guy who's gone on to become venture capitalist today, right? I learned all of this stuff because I just changed my mind, and I was delivering my stuff too, right? And by the time the year was over, I realized that I knew so much more, right? That my career was taking off like a rocket within the company, right? To the point that the day I resigned from Yahoo, I was sitting in a village. I'd left all that to go volunteer in a village in India, right? And I said, the next 3 years, I'm going to give volunteer within a community. When I went to go volunteer, and people heard that I'd left Yahoo, I had 3 job offers waiting for me at that time. People were reaching out to me, do you want to come join our company? Right? Because that was the nature of the relationships that I'd built and the nature of the work that I'd done. That was the respect I got, right? So my advice is, do not worry about what will happen. Worry about learning, worry about growing, and worry about doing your best, right? If every day you get up and say you're doing your best, there's no complaints, right? And as far as you need help or advice or whatever, we are all here, right? You just need to basically reach out and say, listen, I have this problem. I guarantee you somebody's gone through that problem before you. Cool?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks,
awesome. So I think, let me see if there's any other question. I'll take one more question and then we'll go off. So, all right. So I think there are no more questions, so we can call it a day. Thank you very much, guys. It's been awesome having you, and really great seeing you interact and ask questions. And I think that's the way we all grow and move forward. So have a nice rest of the day and talk to you tomorrow.
Prasad?
Bye. Yes.
Nirupama here.
Yeah. What's up, Nirupama?
Can you please stay for 2 minutes, Prasad? Just I wanted.
So Nirupama, I have to head out for something else. I have another commitment that I need to do.
Okay.
So you can probably reach out to Rajiv and then he can get you on. Okay.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.